Good evening to everybody. I am Karen Canfield. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen and currently serving as chair. With me also on this call are our town administrator, Jim Bedreau, vice chair of the board, Tony Vignani, and the lead engineer for the project, John Ramsey. I do believe our state representative, Patrick Carney, is calling in. He's not on the presentation, but he is available to answer questions, as are a number of other people, including our DPW director, Kevin Cafferty, and some other experts from Mr. Ramsey's firm. So tonight, we will be providing an update on the last phase of the berm improvement replacement project underway from Surfside Road to the end of Egypt Beach. As I'm sure you all know, this project has been in design, engineering review, and all necessary permitting, including conservation, for several years. The necessity of the project became abundantly clear after the last two major storms, which I'm sure most of you remember. However, as the project began, individual board members, our board members, received a lot of feedback from residents. A lot of you are here on this call. About the impact that this work was having on both our beach and our community. So in order to address these concerns, Mr. Vignani and I met with our town officials and we paused the work to review the project. In a moment, I will introduce Mr. Ramsey and he will walk everyone through the specifications of the original project and now the proposed modifications. Before I do want to take a moment and thank everyone who took the time to raise these concerns. In my opinion, your engagement will make this work not only meet the original goal of providing coastal protection and improvements, but it will also allow improved residential access across the berm and preserve the beauty of our Egypt Beach berm. There will be time for questions at the end, which I briefly mentioned. I would like everyone to just wait until Mr. Ramsey's presentation is complete. I'm hopeful that a lot of the questions will be answered with the information he provides us. We will, certainly open up for questions after that time. Please know that this meeting is being recorded. It will be made available after completion through Scituate Community TV. And with that, I would like to just briefly introduce Mr. John Ramsey, whom some of you have not had the pleasure of meeting. He is a professional civil engineer with Applied Coastal and was engaged by the town to work on this project. He's performed and provided technical oversight for projects all over the coast. Since 2000, he has served as coastal engineering consultant to the Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management Office. And in this role, his coastal engineering, expertise associated with shore protection structures, sediment transport, and inlet stability came to play. He was educated at Cornell University, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Civil and Engineering, Environmental Engineering, and his master's at the University of Delaware in Civil Coastal Engineering. He is well-versed in our particular coastline, and we were very grateful to have his services throughout this project. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Ramsey. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And good to see participation here. I'm going to try to run through a PowerPoint, and I'm going to make this presentation rather brief. And I'm going to try to touch on some of the questions that we had heard over the last couple of weeks. So I want to just make sure that we touch on what we can, and I'm sure there will be other questions. But I guess the first thing I'm going to do is share my screen and just do a quick PowerPoint presentation here. So is that sharing now? It is. Okay. All right. So obviously the thing that we're talking about here is a Man Hill Egypt Beach. And I just want to point out that this is a berm reconstruction project. A lot of people talked a little bit about the natural nature of this system, the Man Hill Egypt Beach system, which certainly is a natural beach system, a barrier beach system. I would like to point out that this is, it's been a long time since this was actually considered a natural system, in that in about 1978, which I'll talk about after the 78 storm, after the 1978 storm, the berm was breached in several locations. And so the town came in and actually reconstructed the berm. And the way they reconstructed the berm is they actually brought in material that was derived from off-site. A lot of people have called it Riverstone, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But a lot of the material that you see now on the top of the berm, I just would like to point out, is actually not native to the beach, but is actually material that was brought in to reconstruct it in 1979. There have been a number of times where it has been repaired, where more material is brought in. And most recently, and I think this is where some of the material that you're seeing right on the surface right now is material that was derived from Carver. Makepeace, who everybody knows for their cranberry industry, actually provides a lot of sand to various towns. And as a byproduct, when they're screening the sand, they have a whole series of gravel, and it's that dark colored gravel that you see on top of in cobble as well, that you see on top of the berm. And a lot of that material actually is basically sieved out of the sand that came from the Carver pits. So when we started looking into various sources of sediment, the contractors looked far and wide, and we have called around as well. The Carver sites, they're really just not going through enough sand to produce the volume of material that you would need to do this project. So there is no source anymore for that material. So obviously people are looking a little further and wider to try to get the material. And the two closest sites that we could find, and we're required to bring in rounded gravel and cobble material to remake the berm. So it has to be basically glacial outwash material, stuff that's left over from the glaciers, but is not sharp, jagged rocks, but has been, because it's outwash material, has a rounded feature to it. And so the two closest quarries we found, one is located in Littleton, Massachusetts, which is west of 495, west of Boston. And the other one is in Ware, New Hampshire. And that is, basically northwest of Manchester. So you're looking at two sites that are quite far away, but this is really the closest sites that were available for the volume of material we were looking to do to basically do this shore protection project. And I'd like to point out that as part of this project, what we're looking at here, as I mentioned, it was originally constructed in '79, but because the town has maintained it as an engineered berm since 1979, FEMA money is available to reconstruct it. So what ended up happening in Winter Storm Nemo in 2013 is that the berm got knocked down in various places to a lower elevation than it was after it was constructed in 1979. So the town was able to apply for funds, and FEMA would provide 75% of the funds. The town provides the other 25%. And that is to actually return the berm to its previous height, width, and shape. And so what you're seeing when we reconstructed this is looking at the height that it was constructed in 1979 and trying to return that to that elevation and that volume. So the material we brought in, I have to understand that we've looked at this berm for several years, starting way back in probably about 2015. But after the 2018 storms, there was a lot of very coarse material that was exposed on the berm. And I'll talk about the dynamics of how these berms work in a few minutes. But there was a lot of coarse material exposed. There's a lot of material in that berm that is actually quite coarse. But what ends up happening is the waves move things around, and what you see sometimes is much finer material that's on the surface. So we evaluated what was there, and basically the material that makes up that berm is generally a foot in diameter or less, but it's a huge distribution all the way down to sand as well. And you guys obviously see that when you're on the beach. You see the sand down at the toe. You see some of the sand that's in the overwash fans that are in the pond. And you also see a full range of gravel and cobble at various times all the way through the seasons. And I would like to point out that there is certainly a seasonal effect and an effect of how storms move this berm around. So one of the things that some folks had some questions about is, isn't this a natural shingle beach? And I'd like to just point out that yes, it was originally a natural shingle beach. But I think what there may be a misnomer of what the term shingle means. It's actually something that it's basically the British word for cobble. So that it's not something that's a flat shingled shaped stone. It is something that is just the size somewhere in between 3 and 12 inches. That is a range of stone sizes. And so when the British are referring to shingle beaches, and they have lots of natural shingle beaches, if you go over to Wales or Northern England, you see quite a few of these types of shingle beaches. And they are composed very similar to Egypt Beach, Egypt and Mann Hill. And there's a full range of them that vary from a wide variety of very coarse cobble to very fine cobble and gravel. But the one characteristic is generally they have a much finer front face to them going down to the beach, very often sandy in the intertidal zone. So you have typically a sandy beach, especially in the summer during during the anywhere from low tide to mid tide, sometimes low tide closer to high tide. But that is just the way these beaches naturally form, and it's the way the materials naturally move around. Another term that has been floated around a little bit is the term river rock. Just like to point out that there was never river rock on this beach. What was brought in from Carver was not river rock, and what we've put on there now is also not river rock. So river rock is something that's derived from a river, and obviously the natural material there was the natural material that forms these beaches is eroded from the glacial deposits around them, and then the waves beat it up and round it. So this is really just a smooth stone that has been wave washed for decades, and the material that we're placing is glacial outwash material, and within the next as it moves the next couple of years, it will also smooth out just like the stone that you see there. It is rounded now, but there are obviously some places where there's chips off of it. But as the waves attack the berm, they will smooth that out, be very similar to what you see there now. Maybe not in color, but in smoothness. That's the way this is going to progress. The one thing that's also you should be aware of, and one of the things you notice when you walk out there, if you look at Egypt Beach now, a lot of the flatter, smaller stone is up at the surface now. If you go in the winter, it looks very different. It looks much coarser. And what ends up happening is the waves moves the stones around, but they also tend to, the larger stones tend to self-bury, especially in the summer. They tend to move down in the berm. They are heavier. As the waves agitate the surface of the berm, what will end up happening is the larger stones will actually drop down and provide better protection, basically a backbone for the berm. And so if you dig down in this berm, you'll go through layers of various size material, but you will find that the coarse material drops towards the bottom. And one of the things that I actually always find interesting when we go and look at a pit, when we're actually looking to source material, when they drop the stuff off the conveyor belts, the same thing happens. All the coarse material ends up at the bottom of the pile that they form, and all the finer material, the gravelier material, ends up more towards the top. So it's natural for that material to work its way down. But when the waves work things, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but the waves work things, that material, the coarse material, is not something that is going to migrate down to Egypt Beach or migrate down to the lower part of the beach either. It's just not the way that these cobble berms function naturally, or even if they're artificially placed, they don't function that way. So I just want to talk just a little bit about coastal processes, and I'm going to make this quick, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions about this, but basically the tides really have no effect. They're not able to move the cobble. Daily waves really can't move cobble either. They can move the smaller stones, and one of the things, we had a mild nor'easter I guess early last week, and really that had moved some of the smaller stones, but it really didn't rise very far up the berm, so it didn't move any of the larger stones. And so you really don't get much movement from the daily waves, and the daily waves are what transports things along the shore. And in general, the transport here is from north to south. So I can understand there's some concern that material might migrate to down to the Egypt Beach end. But really, it's the daily waves that do that, and the daily waves aren't powerful enough to move cobble that way. During major storms, you've got a lot of overwash, and really most of the movement of material is that now in what we call the cross shore direction, which is perpendicular to the shoreline. And so the shingle beaches tend to reshape into ridges, and they basically form into predictable peaks based on the type of material it is. But they move, the coarser material tends to move landward, and the finer material tends to get pulled offshore during those storms. So you're not going to see the cobble or the coarse material that was brought in migrating its way down to the beach. It will either migrate down into the berm or migrate towards the pond. And so this is, when we do some analysis, and this is not this beach, but we've done a lot of work on cobble beaches, probably more than anybody else has in Massachusetts. But one of the things we do is we do some profile modeling as to what, if you form a cobble berm, how it's going to perform. And so what this, actually, can people see my cursor? Does that work? Okay. So if we put in this is back at a seawall in this case, but if we put in a berm going out towards the ocean, that's the solid line, and the tan is the berm that's would be cobble. What happens after a storm is it kicks it up into these various ridges. This would be kind of the sandier ridge down below, and then this would be the cobble peak ridge that comes in the back. And that's just the way the waves force the shape of this system. And so we can look at wave energy coming in and see how the system is going to perform, and that's the type of thing that you see. So you're going to see the similar thing. This one's built a little bit differently. This is really not intended as a berm project like yours. The berm project would actually, in your case, the berm would be very steep, and the peak would actually form back behind it, not in front of it. So the peak actually ends up moving landward in your case. So there was some talk about storm overwash. Obviously this is at the Surfside end. But one of the things that people have asked, and they've asked this numerous times in numerous places, and I'll try to be as succinct about this as possible. When the material overwashes, and you see these overwash fans, when you get a lot of wave energy, it overtops the berm at high tide, and the wave energy pushes these fans over. Generally, the material that washes over, it ends up being in the finer end of things. It doesn't tend to be the coarsest cobble. The coarsest cobble is able to stabilize the ridge, but the finer cobble gets pushed back. So this material, a lot of people question, why can't we dig that up and put that back on the berm? While this is a constructed berm, the regulatory agencies view this as a natural dune system. So when they view this as a natural dune system, you have to let a natural dune system function in the way it's meant to function, which means that you have to allow it to migrate landward. So you're not able, through regulations, to take the material that is overwashed and put it back on the berm. You are allowed to add new material and make the berm higher. But that is a regulatory standard that people have talked about for years, and it's not something that's likely to change anytime soon. But that is the reason why you're not allowed to go grab that material. I will say there's a slight exception to that, is during a storm when you have an active breach going on like you did in 2018 at several locations through this berm, the town was working very hard to cover those breaches. And so they were taking material from wherever they could get it at the time and pushing it back to block those breaches from reopening. And so in those emergency situations, it's kind of the regulators will allow some of that to happen, but that is not generally the rule. So once you have the material overwashed into the pond, the storm's gone, that material is quote unquote now lost to you as far as your ability to use it for future sourcing of material for the berm. So just put this photo in quick. So one of the things I'd just like to point out, this is looking south, and this is sort of what you can kind of see is some of the material already. This is just taken yesterday, I guess. Yeah. So some of the material from that was pushed up from the nor'easter just last week is already starting to cover the toe of some of the material that was already placed. So you already are starting to see the material that had been there previously already starting to cover the material that was placed recently. And we expect that to continue. And we also expect the material to be mixed in, and then basically the heavier stuff is going to drop down lower and you're going to see, that natural process of the smaller cobble as it gets pushed back up into these berms, basically covering over what was just placed. So really what is all this, the material that was there intended to do is actually to bolster the height and width of the berm so that it can withstand some pretty decent storms. So I just wanted to quickly talk about the sediment. Rather than focusing on the sediment that's already placed, we're well aware what some of the issues are from your folks' perspective. So one of the things that we did is we went up, and actually just got back shortly, a little while ago. We went up to both pits, the one in Littleton and the one in Ware, New Hampshire. And this is a picture of material that it's a smaller size material. It's been basically rescreened, a little slightly smaller from the material that we already had. So this is kind of the finer end of that. This is 2 to 3 inch material. And so, while we believe that the coarser material is best for the longevity of the berm, we also understand some of the concerns that everyone is having regarding being able to walk over it, especially before it's reworked by storm waves. So, the thought was, can we find a material that's at least will perform at least appropriately for what we're trying to do, and also be able to be more consistent with what's seen on the surface. But obviously, this is the material we're looking at. It's 2 to 3 inch screen material. It is not the same dark gray color that you have out there. So there's been discussions of to basically dig a trench, bury it, and we haven't really gotten to the details of what level of cover we put over it, but it maybe 6 to 12 inches of cover over it. And again, once waves start overwashing this, it is going to mix in very rapidly if waves get over this. So if the waves don't get over it, that cover is going to last forever. But as the waves start reworking this, you are going to see that material mix down into the system. And these rocks will start becoming exposed, but they're also going to move around and become more and more rounded and smooth as time goes on. So, generally, again, what we're looking at in the Egypt beach area, we're looking at adding somewhere on the order of 2 feet of material total. So it really is a pretty minor component to the overall amount of material on the berm, but it really does, that extra 2 feet that we need really does make a difference as far as the survivability of the berm during these major storms to try to reduce storm damage behind the barrier beach and dune system. So, and here's another picture of just to give you a different scale. Same material, it's kind of a washed out photo. Sorry, I just took it 2 minutes before we started this. But this is, again, the material just to give you kind of the size of the phone as a comparison. And I actually wanted to just go through a couple questions before I get them, because I know I'm going to get them. So one question was, how wide and deep will the trench be? Basically, the concept is as they're carving the road up to the Egypt beach on the top of the berm, that they will carve out basically 1 foot to 1.5 foot deeper than they would have placed this material, and then and when they carve it out, they're going to plow things out to the side, place this material, and then cover it back over with the existing berm material. So this material would not be seen. Although if it were seen, it would probably blend in quite a bit, at least size-wise, more with the superficial material you see out there now. Let's see, I asked, so somebody asked about material that's washed into the pond, but also making, understand the concept that in that southern area, there's a lot of material that's washed over that kind of blocks the drainage on the backside there from the freshwater ponds. So, I'm not, that's kind of outside the what we're trying to do in this project right now, but certainly dealing with that drainage and having to keep that clear is a challenge. Whether down the road, bolstering the berm is one option. The other option is potentially, putting in some type of culvert there. So if cobble does wash over in that direction, that it doesn't block the drainage coming out. So these are the new stones. And I think, and Kevin might be able to speak to this if I get it wrong, but The new stones, my understanding is that there's going to be a load of stones, of these stones, coming down tomorrow. And I don't know exactly how the public viewing is going to go, but so there will be a truckload of these stones being delivered to the town, but I'm sure that if people want to look at them, that there'll be some arrangements made. And one of the other questions folks have asked is, can we look at this and reassess it next spring, or do we need to do this now, et cetera, et cetera. From an engineering perspective, this berm is much too low. The sooner you do this, the better. The one thing I will say, right now you have the federal government kicking in 75% of the funding, and that is a big deal. I mean, this is not a cheap project. Obviously trucking material down from New Hampshire is very expensive. And the fact that the federal government is willing to, take 75% of the cost, that is critical. And I will say, even if you wait until next spring to do it, I don't think you're going to find a source any better than the sources we found. This is the type of material that's available. And again, you need to keep in mind that what you see out there on the beach is not necessarily natural material either. A lot of that was actually brought in too. And I think that mainly answers most of the questions. I guess there were some issues of access, a discussion of access or public right of way. There was never an intent that, ideally this project would have been done in the fall and the waves would have reworked it, and there may not have been, you may never really notice that it was even there, assuming we had some decent storms during the winter. But, understanding that that's not what happened, that was constructed in the summer. And that, I certainly walked on it. I see that it's, it can be difficult to walk on. I know the town has made an effort to add a path up, and that was part of our permitting at the north side, the Surfside end, there's a path that is actually probably nicer than the path that was there, angling up to access it at that. And the material going over at the north end is actually covered with some of the native, or not, the material was there already. So I think that ends fine. There's now discussion of making sure that at the Mann Hill entrance there, that there's basically kind of a material added there surficially to make sure you can get across the berm there. And then certainly at the Egypt beach end, if we do this approach that we're talking about, again, you're not going to notice any difference because that material will be covered. And so the access will be very much the same as you have now, except that the berm will be about 2 feet higher. So with that, I think that I've answered most of the questions. I've gotten a series here, but I hope I touch on just about everything.
Great. Thank you so much, John. It's a lot of information, but I feel like you did a hit on a lot of the things that we've been hearing. If any of our panel doesn't have anything else they want to add before we go to resident questions, any of you raise your hand? Nope. Okay. What I will endeavor to do, I'm happy to see there's 128 of us here. So there is a feature in the reactions that, is it reactions or no, I should know this, right? You can raise your hand. Seth, my wizard behind the curtain. So if you raise your hand on the screen, then I will endeavor to do my best to call on you, and then we'll unmute you. And right now we've got, I love those little icons. Are you raising your hand with the claps? Okay. All right. I've got a couple in the participant. I'm going to start. Caroline was the first one to do so. So in no particular order, I'm going to unmute Caroline.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Ramsey, for explaining everything. So I live right next to the beach in 79 Egypt Beach Road. So my concern is, the waves every year, they deposit like a couple inches of the smaller stones in our driveway, and we shovel it out and get an amazing workout. Or this year we hired a teenager because we're getting too old. But anyway, my concern is just that the stones, if they're placed too close to our property, given that all the smaller stones, and given that we routinely get telephone poles wash into our property, every other year we've had a telephone pole wash up from the waves. They're very strong. Is that these large cobble will just become projectiles and hit the underside of our structure and cause damage to our structure. I only found out about this project a month ago, so I didn't really have time to speak to anyone about it. I wasn't sent anything by mail at all. So yeah, I mean, that's just my concern. I mean, this idea that they only wash, that the waves aren't strong enough to wash a larger stone, I find concerning. I'm just concerned about the size of the stone, the size of the material just becoming really damaging for the underside of our house.
Okay. So I guess the thing that I would point out is that if we let the berm get lower, then the waves have more energy and they're going to turn, as the beach gets lower and lower, it does end up turning cobbles into projectiles. So one of the important things is to make sure you keep the berm up high so that basically the berm is up at a height that it's dissipating all of the wave energy, or at least most of it, so that anything that is, by the time the water gets over the top of the berm, it's lost a lot of its energy. So if you don't rebuild the berm, basically you are eventually going to get to the point, even if the clearance of your house is more, that cobbles do tend to be projectiles. The project that I'd shown the profile for was actually something we're designing in Plymouth, and the beach has gotten so low that the waves are breaking right on the front of that seawall, and those cobbles are turning into projectiles. So that's what we were trying to avoid. We're trying to use this berm, and that's what this berm is meant to do, is to dissipate wave energy and make it so the waves lose the energy before they can become projectiles.
So is the peak of the berm, is it behind our house or right next to our house?
I'm not exactly sure which house you are. Are you on
I'm right next to Egypt Beach Road. I'm 79 Seaside, so I'm on the south side, where basically all the stone travels every year from the public beach to our driveway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in your area, I think that the berm crest is in front of your house. It's only so it would be in front of your house, not behind it. Oh, did I lose her? I think she's got other things to deal with, more pressing.
Okay. Yeah, so I will ask, because a lot of people want to ask questions. What we will try to do is, if you have a follow-up question, make it brief, but we're going to try to get to everyone so they have an opportunity, and then if you've asked a question, I'll come back to you after everyone else has had an opportunity. I also, if it would be really helpful, is when you are unmuted, if you would just, for everyone's sake, just state your name and your address so we know with whom we are speaking. So I'm going to go with Heather's over here. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, hold on. I did it. It's not. Hold on. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Heather Babineau. I live on Stone
Your
Ave,
address real quick. I'm sorry, Heather. Your address?
13 Stone Ave.
Okay.
So my question, standing from my home, which I've watched the work being done on Man Hill, brought up high, and now you want to work on Egypt Beach to bring it up high. You have a major void under 5 homes that live on the beach. So how do you predict that the water is going to say, no, I'm not going to go under those homes and come into Stone Ave? I don't understand the reason behind the wall. Like, why do the wall over here and do the wall over here, but don't do the wall here between 5 homes? I don't understand that at all.
Okay, well, so what we ended up doing is we ended up permitting the entire project, including under the 5 homes. The problem is that public money cannot be used to nourish or place the berm under those 5 properties unless they give up access rights, basically, to their beach. And it's not something that we're making up, but we knew that this was potentially could be an issue, so we made sure that those homes had the ability to put the material on there if they want. And so that's up to them. What I will say is that we're not going to be funneling water towards you by having a gap in the berm. And I will say that this material, some of the finer material, will kind of start filling in a little bit under those houses. But at the same time, ideally we would like it to go all the way. But just because there is a gap If the gap were in front of the pond and would form a breach, I'd worry a little bit about it. But this is really more something that again, we are still getting good shore protection, but ideally it would be better if the homeowners, stepped up, either gave the easements or actually, did the work in front of their houses. But I will say they have the ability to do that under the permits the town holds. So they do have that. And we did discuss that when we did the permitting. Some of the homeowners that had homes there came and asked about that, and they were told what would need to happen. And
Yeah, but to my understanding, you asked them to give up the rights of their property. Like,
it's not the rights of their property, it's public access easement across their property.
but these homes make up the berm. So you're not doing anything by fixing left and then fixing right. There's still a huge hole. The water's coming through. So one more quick question, because you answered my question. The water's coming through. I know it's coming through. There is a house there that did push up rocks this past March or April with a machine right up onto his property. How did he get the clearance to do that? How did he get that? We didn't have a storm this past March that caused major havoc to work 30 days. How did that house push those rocks up?
I have absolutely no idea.
Well, you drive by, you walk and you see it. So if you've been down the beach today and you saw your job that you already did, you would have seen what this home has done. And I commend him for doing it. He got a machine, he pushed up the rocks, and he's trying to save his house.
Right.
But
So I guess the question that would be, asking the town conservation, again, we weren't involved.
Yeah, she doesn't call back. Haven't heard from her.
Okay, I'd like to move on to another question. We have so many. Let's see. Mr. Zuko, I think you had your hand up a while ago, so we'll unmute you.
Okay, thanks. I went to University of Lowell and I got my geology degree. I live at 377 Tilden Road. I've worked over 10 years as a wetland scientist. And a couple things, just kind of notes of the progress of the job. There's the first thing you did was when you brought the heavy equipment over to Egypt Beach side, that marsh grass was making a comeback, but then you just mowed it all down. So you didn't consider any of that. I felt like that was helping the berm area. So that was kind of like an oversight on your part, where you just kind of mowed down something that was making a comeback for the last 10 years. The second thing that I noticed is there's a manhole in front of the big ramp at Egypt Beach as you go the wooden walkway. Do you know about the manhole that's over there?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So that uncovered itself last summer, but it's now covered again, so you can't see it. So, I kind of disagree in your comments earlier that this stuff doesn't move. It does move pretty quickly. So I'm not sure if there's a real need to do this end of Egypt Beach, because this stuff's going to move. And then I think the third point, I don't really have a question. The third point is, I'm not sure if you had the conversation with the construction workers. I interviewed them in July, kind of get their scope of what they were talking about. And they said the beach that they did last year, they didn't give me the location, that the cobble that they put down actually moved towards the homes that they were trying to protect. And it actually did more harm than good. And that was the construction workers back in early July was telling me that, this isn't going to work. This is just going to destroy the homes that we're putting this cobble next to. So I don't know if you have any comment on the job from last year.
Well, I don't know what job they're talking about. So the only comment I can make is that, these cobble beaches function in a certain way. If you don't build them up to, if you're not doing them up to the elevation that they need to go up to, then, or the volume that they need to be, then yeah, they're going to move very fast. And they're going to lower very fast, and they're going to cause damage to, as I said, if they have a lot of wave energy that's going to get to them, those rocks are going to become projectiles.
Are these the same guys you used last year, or is it
what's
different?
That? Say that again?
Are these the same construction workers you used for the project last year, or were they on a different project without you?
I have no idea what project they were on.
Okay.
It wasn't not with me.
Okay, all right. So, but, all right.
All right, John, we're gonna move on, okay?
Yep.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna go, let's see, there's so many here. I'll try to get everybody quickly. I've gone to, oh, I unmuted you and now sorry. All right, Ken, I think. Are you
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good, there you are, okay.
Hi, Ken Hirschfield, 118 Captain Pierce Road. Thanks, Karen, and thanks, Jim, for putting this together. And John, thanks for your work and your PowerPoint and your explanation. I mean, it's very helpful. Couple things. I mean, you know, John, the big rocks, I mean, again, you can't walk on them. We know that. We're now willing to put them under the berm a little bit. That's great. You have stated in your letter of a couple of weeks ago and tonight that the larger rocks become self-burying. They dig themselves down into the berm. You're talking about maybe 6 to 12 inches down or 6 to 12 inches of material over the new rocks that you'd like to put on. Can you maybe make the case for not going deeper with the new rocks? Also, I mean, if the whole idea is to fortify the berm, where do the rocks need to be? Can they be like rear of the center line to kind of shore it up so that and buried so that there's no chance that these rocks come out? If you put 6 inches of existing rock over the new cobble, I mean, I think just dog walkers every day of the week, because people are down there every day, all year round, on this beach. It's not just summer. It's not just used in the summer. Will that suffice? I mean, just put this stuff as deep as possible. I mean, in one sentence you said it won't get uncovered. It'll self-bury. You've also said it goes cross shore, but it only goes backwards. I just want to know why do you not expect this new material to be down onto the beach into the surf zone? So that's a good start, I guess.
Okay. I'm trying to think where to start here. So it is intended to fortify the berm. And I think the one thing to point out is what we're kind of stuck with as far as the construction is what FEMA is willing to pay for is the way this berm was constructed in 1979, which we've determined is of sufficient elevation to dissipate at least up to I will say a moderate nor'easter. Okay, so when you have a 1978 storm or maybe the 2018 storm, we're still going to have overwash in those types of conditions. So what I showed or tried to show in some of those plots was that what ends up happening when you do have storm waves is they tend to move the stone landward and push it up into a ridge. And so what you're going to get, so I guess this goes to the burial question. Can we bury it 5 feet down? Sure, it comes with a cost. Is there a point in doing that? Really the point here is, from our perspective, we're bringing in stone that is much smaller, that's only going to be, 2 to 3 inch, and it is going to be pretty easy to walk on. I can tell you this material looks very different than what you're dealing with right now. From that perspective, even if it comes uncovered, I don't think it's going to be a problem. But the reason why you don't want to or don't need to bury it very deep is you are going to get these ridges of cobble. And if the berm does get overtopped, which is when you would get this stuff exposed, you're going to have a lot of cobble on the front face getting pushed up over the top of the berm. And so you're going to end up having this natural cover of the material that's already there. So it's not, this is all going to, it's not like all of a sudden this stuff is super hard and it's going to sit there on its own. It's going to get mixed in and it's going to, basically end up being in any berm that whether the rocks are already there, because I can tell you, I've seen rocks that are at least 2 feet in diameter in that berm that are already there. So in those get buried and they find their way to the bottom of the berm. They end up getting exposed on occasion when the front side of the berm gets eroded away. But typically what will happen is they will end up reburying themselves because gravity just moves the larger stones down through the smaller stones. So over time, they are going to self-bury. Are they going to self-bury in the first week? Maybe not. But by next spring, if we get hit by some storms, they're going to be buried with the material that is being washed over them from the existing berm. Because again, you're only looking at adding about 2 feet of, and about 30 feet across on the surface there. You're really not looking at a humongous amount of material that's being placed there. So this is like a small portion of the berm anyways. And I guess the last question was whether things are going to roll seaward. None of the rocks, I mean, if you look at the beach system, you may have rocks that get exposed that were underneath the berm, and because the berm erodes back, you start seeing some bigger stone that gets exposed. But those stones don't roll forward. The berm is moving landward. And you don't have, it's not that you can't have a rock roll down onto the beach, but that's not the way that rock would very rapidly be pushed back by the next storm. So the storm waves want to move that material back, and the larger stone will naturally migrate down. So as the waves rework this system, that's the direction that things are going to head. And I'm sure if you have walked it all year, you notice that there's a huge difference between what the winter beach looks like and what the summer beach looks like. And that is a huge effect. You get a lot more sand on the front face in the summer. And that's the milder waves bringing in the sand over top of the existing cobble. And then the cobble gets more exposed in the winter. That's the sand leaving. A lot of people think that cobble is washed in the winter. That's not what's happening. It's the sand that's being washed out. It forms a bar offshore, and then it moves back on.
And John, do you have any estimation, if we can, I know everyone says, weather's getting worse or whatever, but if you could just kind of model the average number of storms, the average intensity, how long do you anticipate this project's going to last before new material is going to need to be brought in, and we have to do this all over again? And that'll end my questions. Thanks, Karen.
That's fine. Yeah, I wish I had a Ouija board a little bit, but I will say that I have not seen intensity or frequency of storms go up. What I have seen, if you look back the last 50 years, we've had on the order of 3/4 of a foot of sea level rise, and somewhere in that neighborhood. And what that does is the minor storms now have a bigger impact than they used to. So it's really just the water level going up. The intensity of the actual storm, I mean, I think from an intensity level, the 78 is still the storm that people remember as sort of the storm of record. And then if you go back before that, it's the 1898 Portland gale. Those two storms really stand out. And even though the 2018 storm was pretty bad and had some very high storm surge, the biggest problem with that storm was its duration. I mean, it lasted for 9 or 10 days of super elevated water levels. So I don't think, it's not the frequency of the storm. I think it's more of a relative sea level rise thing that you're fighting. And so every storm just gets worse and worse.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm going to go to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson next. They've been patient. Thank you.
Hi.
Your address, please. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Vita Johnson. My husband Dean is with me. We're at 77 Seaside Road, which FedEx can hardly ever find because it's actually on Egypt Avenue. We're the last house at the southern end of Egypt Beach. And yes, everybody takes a walk, turns around in front of our house. We've owned since 1967. My husband and I were fixing up and rebuilt the house in 78. And we're happy to say and proud to say that we built it at 90 feet above sea level instead of the required 19 feet. And we have not had any damage to the house in 40 years, except we lost the stairs once. Twice. Twice, okay. But the house itself stood. The water comes under the house. My question is about funneling effect of anything that happens when you add stone at one end of the beach. Was any study done? Do you foresee? I know we're only 2 houses here, 77 and 79, but we have no option of putting stone behind us is the road. And as you know, the road floods. We have spent a lifetime. My husband has literally by hand shoveling sand back and forth, creating our own little berms.
In the 2018 storm, we had to get a big machine in. We had 7 feet of rock and sand at the base of our driveway. So, that was the worst.
So the question is, there's no place that anything can be added. Our question is this going to create a larger funnel effect that will maybe affect what happens to the houses right there at the end of the beach?
Okay, yeah, and I can try to answer it. So basically, any of these projects, there is, because you're looking at the ocean as a huge body of water, you don't end up getting a funneling effect because there's, if you guys had a pond behind your house, and I know you have water that goes under your house, but if you had a major body of water, you could, form something, an inlet type thing that could funnel water. But since you don't, you have you have the road, and I realize the elevation of that area is not that high. It really is just, it's not going to create a funnel effect because, the beach is pretty coarse. It's not going to be something that scours out deep at all. So your end of the beach, there's nothing that should create any type of funneling. And even, going back to the question somebody asked previously, I don't see any funneling effect even at the area where the 5 houses are further north. But those 5 houses that are basically out in front of the berm, the one thing I will say is because that berm's low there, the water is going to go over. We know it goes over. You guys see it. So, but it's not, neither one is going to create quote unquote a funneling effect.
Thank you.
Kudos for you guys for doing this Zoom. This has been very, very useful. Thank you, Karen.
And thank you, Tom.
Thank you for participating. On this, next go to Donna Hamill. If I did it right.
Hi.
Hi, Donna.
Yes, I'm a fairly new resident. I live at 17 Old Farm Road, and I go to Egypt Beach every single day. So it's a beautiful area. I just think it's a wonderful thing that we're doing to protect all of our real estate and lives, to be building up a berm like this that is sorely needed. What I have found is, or what I'm thinking is, that everybody has an issue with the type of rocks only because of the access problem of walking on these harder, larger rocks and things like that. But I find that walking on the beach as it is now is a problem, because those small rocks shift constantly, and it's almost like walking in quicksand sometimes. You just never know at what point you're going to slip and, almost go head over, tea kettle. But what I'd like to think about is it possible for the town to put more of those access, like the ones down at Egypt now, with the nice walkway, the boardwalk type of thing, on, maybe a couple of more there that give people the ability to walk over this, and then just have to deal with going down on the base side, which is probably a little easier. Because it really is just an access problem. It's the rocks are going to be there. It's, you're trying to stop Mother Nature. That's never going to happen. So we're just doing the best we possibly can. But I would just like to see more and better walkways so that we could get over the rocks to the top of the berm and then deal with it later.
Okay, great question. I'm going to ask Mr. Bedreau to field that a little bit. And then the next person that we are going on the list of hands is Nancy Fay, who's also on our beach commission. So maybe she can chime in on that process as well, because they've been working on those issues. Mr. Bedreau?
Yeah, I almost defer to Nancy on that, but it is something we look at. We've put the beach mats down on most of the other beaches, Peggotty, Hammerock, to make it easy to access those beaches. So it's something we can look at. The boardwalk is a pretty big project. But a beach mat would be something we could look at, to roll out a beach mat over that so people can get up and over easier.
Yeah, I think that would be a huge improvement,
Okay, thanks, Donna. I'm going to move on to Nancy Fay, who is, who has been very involved in these conversations and also serves on our beach commission. Nancy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, oh, there you are. Found your box.
Thank you. The answer to the mat question or the boardwalk question is no, you can't. You can only do it on public beach if you're using CPC funds. Otherwise, they would have to be private funds or something other that the town comes up with. But you cannot use any CPC fundings, which is what we use for the Moby mats. With regard to Mr. Ramsey, what you're saying, what is the town planning on doing right at this moment for covering up what's Surfside to Mann Hill that you cannot walk on, and that the rocks are sharp and it will take generations for those rocks to actually get smooth? What are you planning? What's the town planning on doing?
I mean, right now, the town was just planning on letting Mother Nature take its course. It's not something that's going to take decades. It's something that actually will happen. As soon as we get a storm that goes over the top of the berm, which based on past history, we had 2 storms that did it 2 years ago. We didn't have any storms that did it last year. So I don't anticipate that it's going to take, something that's going to take decades. It's something that's going to take a decent sized storm, and then you're going to see that stuff start burying itself.
Now, if the case is next year that this is still exposed and still an issue, will the town readdress it?
I won't throw Mr. Ramsey that question because he's our consultant. So Jim or Kevin, would you like to field that question?
I mean, it's limited what we can do, whether we can put a machine up there. One of the things we're going to do as part of the reworking of this project is improve the access at the end at Mann Hill. But we can't put a machine up on top of that berm and put rocks back on the top of that entire berm. It would destroy the berm. It would ruin all the work they've done. If we had a big storm and an emergency, we'd go out there and throw some stuff back up there. But I think for the most part, we just want to make sure we have access at both ends and in the middle. And the berm's going to have to take care of itself. Kevin, do you disagree with any of that?
Wait, let me unmute him. Nope, he's just shaking. Okay. I do want to point out that I don't know if anyone, I think John touched on it and Jim just did, that already there's a couple of places on top of that berm that the original stone was brought over in a pathway. So there are points that are now currently used, we know, by residents that have already been improved so that you have a way to go from landlord to the beach side.
And Nancy, maybe the last thing to say is even last week, one of the things we see, obviously in the southern part of that area, there was a lot more stone added because that berm was very low in that area just north of the houses. And you already see some of the material that was on the beach actually starting to cover over the lower part of what was placed. So I think, it's not just that material needs to get reworked, but there is going to be material that's on the beach now, within the dune system now, that's going to get pushed up and over that berm as well. So, it's very likely next spring, even if we don't have a major storm, that you're going to see some of the material just kind of scattered within that. And if you noticed where they placed material on the way out, they did do a little bit of covering right towards the end. The north end, and you actually see that by placing even just a handful of material through the crevices, it actually makes the surface much easier to walk on.
All right, we have hold on. I'm unmuted. We have 4 new questions and then a couple of, I think a repeat or 2. So Mr. James Young, come on down.
Hi. Yes, hi there. Thanks for taking the call. I will start the video. So I'm James Young. I'm at 100 Gilson Road and, a user of the beach. Thanks again for doing this. A lot of questions have already been answered, but there's still something that seems to be lacking a little clarity, or I feel like one of the potential outcomes that you're describing could be that we might see that coarse surface material sitting on the topmost part of the ridge will have access points onto the Egypt beach part. But until there is some large storm that's actually going to somehow get to the top of that berm to maybe accelerate either pushing it down or rounding it, if we were to not get a severe weather event, which would actually be a good thing, are we looking at a possible scenario where you're basically going to have almost like a baby seawall sitting at the topmost part of the ridge? There'll be access onto the beach so people can sort of traverse to the levels and get to the beach, but what people do now, which is using that topmost ridge, that may not be accessible to all until such time that actually gets tamped down or tumbled in the ocean. Is that a scenario?
I think that's sort of what I was saying, that is a scenario, but I would also say that there's very likely that there's going to be material that's pushed up and scattered across it. And if you look at areas where that material was placed that way, it actually makes it much, the crevices and everything fill in, and it's much easier to walk on.
So the water doesn't have to breach for that to happen, is what you're saying, that even though typically, even in its current height, I don't know that the water has actually touched the top of that berm, I don't know when, to be honest, but like you're saying, you still think that the waves can push that material up even if the water's not actually reaching the top.
I mean, it would be the spray of the water up at the top of the crest that would push that finer gravelly type material in there. But I will say that if you go down there and you look at those overwash fans, that berm gets overtopped a lot more frequently than you may realize.
Yeah.
It's, for people who've lived right down on there, it's fairly frequent.
Okay.
Just for clarity, Mr. Young, you're talking about the Mann Hill portion of the beach, where we've already done, right?
I mean, I personally was talking about the stretch of Egypt Beach that people typically access, for use.
Okay,
Meaning,
because what we're talking about at Egypt Beach, just to be clear, the stones are going to be much smaller than what you see down at Mann Hill. We're going to source a much smaller stone.
okay,
We are
so
going
that's
to cover them
definitely happening.
over with the stone that's there.
Yeah.
And you're only talking about 18 inches to 2 feet of new stone, as opposed to the Mann Hill section where at some point you have 4 to 5 feet of new stone. So it's not going to look anything like the Mann Hill end, if that's what you're asking.
And I think that's what this is, for me, that's what this Zoom has really helped clarify, because, what we were hearing, or it wasn't clear to folks what was happening there. So that's been very helpful. So thank you. That's my only question.
Okay.
Karen, you're still muted.
Well, all I just said was I'm going to Mr. Allman next. I'm going to go to the people that have already spoken at the end so that everyone that hasn't spoken has a chance first. So, Mr. Allman, you're up.
Thank you. Very informative discussion. My question, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'll start my video. This is my first time on Zoom, so I'm not very good at this.
We're all learning.
But my question is for Karen. Karen, I live at 3 Jawel Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Jawel Avenue and Montvale and Graves, if you're familiar with them.
Yes.
These are private streets. And so the Board of Selectmen sent out a letter, I think sometime in early August, talking about the Egypt Beach berm. And in that letter, it said at one point, in addition, the contractor will be providing access points at Jawel Avenue and Surfside Road. The access at Egypt will be unchanged with the existing boardwalk. And so the implication of that letter is that Jawel Avenue would provide a public access over to the beach. My neighbor, Liz Charlton, was very concerned about that. And I think she spoke to somebody at the town, perhaps in the Board of Selectmen, and was told that there will be another letter coming out which would clarify that the access points are only at Surfside, Mann Hill, and I guess the parking area at Egypt Beach, and would not include Jawel Avenue. And I was hoping that it would be something that would say we made a mistake in including Jawel Avenue, but I don't think that's going to happen. But at least I'm hoping that a subsequent letter will be sent out that references only the public access points over the berm.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, so yes, Liz came in and she spent some time with our town administrator and the head of our DPW. So it was nice to have her come in and have that conversation directly. Is your concern that because you're a private way, you don't want to basically obviously you don't want people to be parking on your street and walking up over that? Is that your concern?
Exactly.
Okay. So yeah, so I think, honestly, I think this is more of a semantic issue. As you probably already know, there is access from your neighborhood across that marshland over to the berm, and your neighborhood typically will go up and over. That's how your neighbors get over to the beach. And what's been improved is stones have already been added there to make that passage easier, basically, because of the increase. So that was an accommodation because we're all well aware that this is an area that your neighborhood always uses. So you're right that it's not public, and I'll work with Jim to come up with a better way of expressing that, or maybe we don't. We'll talk about that. The intention is not to make your ways a public access as
Oh, I understand.
You're not allowed to park on your street.
Yeah, I think it was inadvertent. And so, yeah, I did not seem to want to imply that was done purposely to make it, but again, I think if there is a way that you could clarify.
Oh, you froze. Yeah, point is taken. The intent was to make sure that those who do traverse there can, and not to change the access or the use that's currently there. Hopefully that answers you. You froze, Mr. Allman. I'm going to go to, let's see, user 88 has been waiting. I'm going to go to Mr. User 88, whoever you are. If you would say your name and your address, that would be helpful.
This is Ned Stanton at 4 Stanton Lane, one of the 5 houses that people are talking about. I was at the prior meeting in April of 2019 and asked some of these questions, but was not allowed to finish, nor were they answered. My family has been building up the berm the last 97 years on our own dime, to the benefit of the residents of Stone Ave and the Squashkit Pond area. Had we not built up the berm, the beach would be halfway up Stone Ave by now. And I've cleared the stream behind the house to prevent flooding in the neighborhood, and the sheep's ponds to the south would prevent flooding from the whole area south of me. Are you telling me that the work I have done has not benefited the town? Why won't the town rebuild the whole berm without taking any property rights?
Thank you for that question. I am going to ask Mr. Bedreau to jump in on this. I might need Kevin to back up too. Because this isn't really
same issue that you have. It's the same issue you have with the seawalls down on Oceanside. Without a public benefit or a public access, you cannot use federal funds to do those projects, period. The same issue we had down in Hummerock. And again, it's the same issue on Oceanside where you see new seawall, and then you'll see a house with old seawall because those people did not give access to the beach. So in order to use federal funds, there must be a public benefit or public access.
Oh, you're muted. Hold on.
You have anything you want to add to that?
Hold on.
No, I think that covers everything on it.
There is public access on Stanton Lane, and they come down Stone Avenue across my property over the beach. And I don't let bother anybody. I let them go by. I've never given them hard trouble. But, people come down, they park in our parking area, they block us in, and people are up on the house during the winter. So, people have plenty of access to the area down there. And there's a right of way there that people have gone down for years. So to say there isn't a public benefit is not true. And I have done for 66 years with my father and myself and my grandfather have cleared those roads and the marsh and the stream to the public benefit.
I'm not arguing with that, but it is a private beach. You own the beach in front of the house, correct?
The beach in front of the house. It's a lot that's 90% underwater, okay? But I do want to sit in front of my house, for the few weekends that I'm able to go down there and not have people tell me, I won't say what they say to you if you ask them to move, or they have dogs off the leash that are under your house. I won't say it, okay? But that happens. And that's not enforced by the town either.
Okay. If I could interject just for a second. I think,
Mr. Ramsey, I've been there 97 years. Nobody wants to hear how I think the beach is going to move. And the rocks that are on the beach north of me are going to sink down to the beach because they're going to get undermined by the smaller stones. And they do get moved in the big storms.
Okay. We do value, obviously, your experience down there. I think your particular case, it would be really helpful if you came in and had a conversation with Jim or with Kevin, because I think those are issues that are outside of sort of this construction that we would certainly want to have a conversation with you. But if you don't mind, if we could do that outside of this Zoom, because this is not the problem.
I've been down to town hall many times about different things. So, and about rebuilding the berm and pushing it back up.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're informed.
We have done a lot of benefit for the town, clearing the road, clearing the brook, keeping the berm up for 97 years.
Unfortunately, the problem is now, sir, and I'll just say this in general, the problem, sir, is that under the current laws of the land, you actually aren't permitted to do that, and that's a whole nother conversation. But you know, things were different, and if they were better or worse, I won't judge that. I just know we have to go by the rules we have today, unfortunately. So I do have a couple of people that haven't had a chance to ask questions. If we could go with them, and certainly we can continue this your particular conversation individually, if you don't mind. I don't think Sue's computer, I don't think you've had a chance. Have you, Sue's computer? Hold on, I'm unmuting you. You'd state your name and address. Did I get you? Hold on.
Hello?
Okay, there we go.
Well, this is a boy named Sue.
Hi, Sue.
This is Dan Whitney on Sue's computer, 7 Stone Ave in Scituate. And first, I'd like to say, Ned, thank you for the job you've done at the end of Stone Ave. It is greatly appreciated and not always noticed, and especially letting us walk across your property to get to the beach. Also, thank you, Karen, Tony, Jim, John, and Kevin. I know you've had a very long day, and it's greatly appreciated that you allow the town to give your input. I have a comment, John. Been on this beach a number of times, had a number of people tell me this beach has never been touched. There's been nothing added to this beach. There's been at least, I've lived in the town since '85, over in Stone Ave since 2002. So I'm a newbie. I will never be a Scituate native because I got here in '85. But I love this area. I'm on the beach every day with Ken and other people almost every day of the year. I've seen right now in Egypt, there's a rock field in the summer. The sand is less and less. That hasn't been addressed, John, at all. I mean, I think I know the history of erosion and everything on this town. So I think that's where the sand and all the beach, there used to be beach grass down here, sand, ribbons of sand around Scituate Lighthouse. They're no longer there. So as I'm looking at, you can stand now in Egypt Beach parking lot on the wooden walkway, look up the beach, and there's gray shading, and then there's granite shading, and they're all the ridges where the stones lie. And the gray ones probably must be the oldest. They're the ones that look more like shingle, and they're actually rectangular and round, if that makes sense. They're rounded, but very thin. And then there's some granite stones that have been introduced. There's a number of different stones that have been introduced. The larger stones are sitting in those ridges next to the smaller stones. So, and as I go up to the Mann Hill, and I apologize that I wasn't involved in this project earlier. I did receive some notification, and it just referred to fill and addressing the cobble. I didn't understand the scope until I heard the trucks running at the end of Surfside. I ran up there, and honestly, I was very disappointed in the size of the stones. I went to see the order conditions. It said 9 to 12 inches. I took a tape measure to several stones there. They're much longer than, I don't know if it's 12 is the width, but there's some stones that are much larger. It seems like the overwhelming majority of those stones are over 12 inches. That's just me personally. I've seen, there was a storm 3 Saturdays ago, I think it was probably like July, that came in, the surfers were out, but some of that cobble already has been taken from the bottom of the Mann Hill extension portion and put on that stone. Interesting to hear John say that that will be washed back. So we will see. I can't thank you enough for going out and sourcing new stones. That's fantastic. And I can't wait to see them. The question I have is, I'd like to know, I'd like, John, you to expand a little more on why we can't go down further with the stones. And if they're close to the same size, I totally understand. There's already there's a stone field at the end of Stone Ave right now, several stones that are over 12 inches. Where they came from, where they migrated, not from the new work, that's for sure. They've been there for a while. So those are big stones that are on the beach in the summer. Again, not a lot of sand there anymore. You find a patch of sand at low tide, you're like, there it is, and everyone fights over it. So my question is, if you could expand a little on why you don't feel it's necessary to bury these stones deeper than 12 inches. And the second is, how wide at the top, averaging from Stone Ave down to the Egypt Beach plankway, the walkway up to the beach, will the top of the berm be?
How wide? Yeah.
How wide? What is the width, John? And thanks again for doing this.
No problem. Yeah, I wish I had the plans in front of me. But let me maybe touch on a couple of things, because you brought up the sand issue, and I'm well aware of that. And I would certainly direct you to some work we did for the town in 2016. There's certainly a dearth of sand, and things are getting worse over time, but in front of the seawalls as well as in front of your beaches. As the sand, you really have no sand source is what really's happened. You've seawalled a lot of the coast, and that's made it so the coast can't erode. And if there's no natural erosion, you don't have any new sand coming down. So keep that in mind. So, I mean, that is something that's going to change. It does come back and forth at Egypt, there's no doubt. But that rock field down at the end of Egypt, that is going to, you probably should get used to it. It's what it's going to, it's what it's going to be. As far as the size of the stone, the one thing I will say, the sieves they used were, one of the sites used a 10-inch sieve and one used an 11. The problem is, I actually saw some stones that I had a hard time potentially believing that they made it through as well. We were up at the source today and looked at the way they were sieving stuff. And there, a lot of this stuff can be oblong and it still fits through the sieve. I mean, this stuff is shaken pretty hard. But it, the material is what was specified. We were looking at, maximum size of the 9 to 12 and all the way going down to lower end. The way they are screening this, there's not a lot of low end material. And what we're trying to do is kind of make, with this new material, it's going to be obviously smaller and going that route. As far as the burial goes, what it really comes down to is that there's a cost associated with it. And it's sort of if you think about it, it's the cost benefit. I mean, we are looking at a pretty minor amount of material. Jim had brought up that there's about 4 feet added at some places in Mann Hill. It's actually 6 feet. That is a very large set of fill there. If you go to the south end there, you're really looking at 18 inches to 2 feet. It's a pretty small layer. And if we bury it by about a foot, and again, I'm not going to say you're not going to see the color of the rocks come up, but you're only going to see them after we get some major wave event that goes over the top, which means it's going to be mixed in. It's not going to all of a sudden just uncover and just be sitting there, as a single row. It's going to end up being mixed because the waves attacked it. And so it's going to mix in, and because that material tends to be rounder and heavier, it's going to kind of work its way down in those flattish rocks that you talked about. You notice they kind of rise to the top because they're more easily movable by waves. So they tend to rise to the top, and the rounder, heavier stones work their way down as the waves rework the berm. You do see the ridges, and yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, where you see the different gradations right up, the crest of the ridges and how the stuff forms right on the backside. That's the way these berms naturally form. But you really need those waves. It'd be great to be able to mix all this material and take the time to mix it so that it would, be natural. But we're really just add a layer and then let nature do its thing is what we're after. And I understand the look of things when you first see it here, but having done this in some other places, I went through some pretty hefty, difficult public meetings at Winthrop Beach. And then we had some storms, and I never heard another word. Not a word of thanks either, by the way.
Yeah. I would want to make clear that I'm not about the aesthetics or the color of the stones. I'm only about how large those stones, because you say in your report, they will come perpendicular and rest on the front of the berm. Is that correct? The larger stones? Let me see if I can find the quote exactly in your report. You wrote to Sean McCarthy. It says,
Yep.
12 inches diameter, cross shore direction, i.e. perpendicular, spread the material along the berm profile, correct?
Right. So it's going to move. What I mean by cross shore, it's going to move in the direction. It's basically going to move back towards the pond.
Okay.
It's not going to, because of the way these beaches form, as I said before, the fine grain material tends to be on the front face and go into that flatter part of the beach profile, those sandy areas you're trying to grab to sit on.
Okay, I read that as berm profile, meaning ocean side. So, and that's what I've seen over the years, that gradual, and that is why there are big stones littered now on Egypt Beach, because that cobble that was larger seems to get down there and the waves don't push it up. And also the fact that these larger stones could be projectiles and weapons on the 5 houses that are on the berm that are basically unprotected now in front. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the thing to point out at the Egypt Beach end, the cobbles you're seeing, and it goes to this seasonal thing. If you had more sand, you wouldn't see the cobbles because they'd be buried. But it's not that the cobbles are washed down there. It's the cobbles were always there, and just that the sand has disappeared, and that's why you're now seeing them. Yes, the waves eventually are going to roll those up, but again, they don't turn into projectiles unless you have a very low beach. And you have a lot of basically your wave is breaking on the stones. And that's like what I was talking about in Plymouth. If the wave's breaking, then it can make the cobbles fly. But if it's up at the top of the berm, the wave is breaking and then you just get the uprush and then it's just pushing the cobbles back. And that's the way they protect the shoreline behind it. Okay. So that's why I'm not worried about this projectile concept unless the beach gets really low and you're having waves break right on coarse cobble.
My history is the town's done a great job of making levels through some of these refurbishings. Beautiful. One time it was 3 levels, then it became 2. But after a very short period, one winter, that gets scoured out and you have a bowl. You no longer have those levels. You basically had a bowl, and the top of the berm got narrower and narrower. That's my question about the width of the berm when the project completed. But that scouring out, there aren't just small cobble in there. There's some large cobble. Yes. And that's where I believe, and I'm deferring to your knowledge, but that's where I thought that those larger stones have ended up at the bottom of Egypt Beach. And I feel that that's going to happen out at Mann Hill and the Surfside to Mann Hill project. But again, I defer to your,
I think if they become exposed, I think you're going to find that it's because the beach got lower, not because these migrated down the beach.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Am I muted? No. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. It is now 7:25. So in the interest of all of our attention spans, I hope that you can address your questions as quickly as possible so we can get to everyone. So Kathleen Manny, you're next.
Oh, so the width is 10 to 15 feet at the crest, just so I give you that last piece of information.
Okay. Thanks, John. Kathleen?
Hi. Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Kathleen. Yep, Kathleen Nadell, 13 Priscilla Ave. And we are, 200 feet from the Atlantic Ocean with no berm or any seawall. So I guess my question was really about the berm being, why the berm's there and it doesn't come all the way across to Carver. And we just have open ocean and the water, we're all on pilings. And sort of the whole process is that the waves come and go and it recedes and we pick the stones up off the street like everyone else. And so I guess I'm just confused, like why we don't just let that berm just go back to natural, like what we have here, that pretty much stretches from 79 Seaside all the way down to Carver, which is just open water.
Okay.
I'm just curious. It's just, I've never understood it.
Fair enough. So the concept, obviously the berm is for storm protection of the houses behind it around the pond. So, I mean, there's a lot of low-lying properties around the pond and we're trying to keep there is going to be water that comes over the berm, but we're trying to keep that water to a dull roar rather than, basically being the same height as the ocean, because the properties around the pond would flood a lot more horrifically than they do right now. So, if you didn't have that berm to prevent, because again, it's not just, that you're not worried necessarily about a breach forming that's going to be a tidal inlet. It's more just the more volume you get overwashed, the higher the pond's going to raise because it can't get out the culverts on the backside quickly enough. And we see that, I'm thinking in Hull at Straits Pond, you have that huge problem there with the, when you have overwash of that beach, the pond level goes up, several feet. So they usually try to, they have a gate there where they actually try to lower the pond before the storms, close the gate, and then try to manage it that way. But, you guys don't have a system like that, but we are just trying to keep the water, as much water out of the pond as we can. Oh, Karen, you're muted.
Sorry, new to this game, right? Krista Goodman, I don't believe you've had a chance yet, so we'll go to you next. If you're there. Mr. Goodman?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Ah, there you go. That was operator error, sorry.
Thank you. So I guess I have more of a comment. I'll turn it into a question, but I don't know Mr. Stanton, but I appreciate everything that he said and his questions and his contributions to the beach. We have a similar situation. I live at 3 Seagate Circle, so the very north end of this project. You showed a picture earlier of the overwash. That was my property that you were showing there. We have a similar situation with a private lot, empty lot, that is currently part of the berm, but it's on private property. And so I guess the question is the town willing to try harder and be more creative to work with those residents that have privately owned land on the berm or part of the berm to try to come up with some sort of creative solution? I know Mr. Boudreau mentioned that it's just black and white. It sounded like that these funds can't be used for private property unless it sounded like a permanent grant was given to the town and to the residents. I have to think that there's something that can be done to be more creative with the language and the legal contract that can be in place to do some sort of work. Because if this property that's in front of my house, if you brought that picture back up, if it breaches again for the 3rd time since I've been here in 8 years, not just my house, but the entire Seagate Circle and Musquashnet Pond area suffers from that. And that part of the project was not in scope. So I'm just curious if the town is willing to try and be more creative and work harder to find a solution for those privately owned properties that are part of the berm.
Kevin, you raise your hand on that?
I did. Chris, no, I remember when you lost your shed, I think you just put all your exercise equipment in the back of it.
Yeah,
We met
it's
with,
back.
okay, great. We met with the owner of that property probably 3 or 4 times. He's a doctor, discussed it in depth, and I don't know if he thinks he could use it as a vacant lot and expand and put a house there or whatever it is. He wasn't interested in giving us easement. So my guys met with him probably 4 times and he wasn't interested. So there's not much more we can do at that point.
No, I understand, Kevin, and you guys have been phenomenal through all of this, especially with my property. My point is that from talking, and I don't want to speak for him, I won't, but from what I understand and from what Mr. Stanton said, it sounds like there isn't a lot of, we haven't looked at it, whether there's another solution other than a permanent access for the town to the property is the only way that we could use those funds to repair the berm in those areas. And maybe there's another way.
And on that, we're dealing with federal funds. We wouldn't be eligible for federal funds necessarily if we did it on our own. And they're paying 75% of it now.
Again, so I guess
we look into it all the time because Oceanside Drive's a perfect example. We want to extend the wall the whole way down.
So if there's a way, and we can take this offline, but I'd like to be included. I'm not included. It's not my property, right? But I am, as are the Stone Ave residents. We are kind of at the mercy of those decisions, right? So if there's a way to continue the conversation to try to get creative, and if we could find another solution, I would be in, and I know that several other of my neighbors would be too.
Yep, we'll gladly give you all the information that we have, and you can work on your neighbor to give an easement. That's glad.
I think what Mr. Goodwin's asking is, would we be willing to talk to our federal partners about loosening that restriction? We can ask. I'm not sure who our new U.S. Senator is going to be. It's not 8 o'clock yet. We're happy to talk to them. I'm going to tell you, it's probably pretty doubtful because this money has to spread all across the country. So they're pretty particular about their rules, but I'm willing to ask.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if we can participate to add weight to the ask, then I'm in, and I know my neighbors would be as well.
Okay.
All right, am I unmuted? All right, thank you so much for that. I think we're learning a lot as well. We got 4 more. I'm going to go back to Caroline, and then Nancy, Branton, and Ned are waiting. So let's, Caroline. Oh, wait, not hearing you. Hold on. Okay.
Hi, Karen. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask about where the berm is going to end. So the stake was put right next to my fence, which divides my property from the public beach. I just want to make sure that my fence isn't buried. And then also the stake is in the middle of my bushes, which prevent erosion. And the whole time that we've been here, we haven't had any erosion underneath. We've had tons of erosion, but just not underneath where the bushes and grasses are. So, you know, I wanted to hear about the project in terms of the bushes and grasses, that those aren't going to be underneath rocks at the end of this, and that also our private fence is not going to be buried.
So, I mean, yeah, so the stake is put at the end of the public property. And so it tapers up from there. So it's not just it's not going to be buried and drop straight down. It's going to rise up slowly to where we need it, and then go from there, transition up over 30-foot stretch. So no, there won't be any burial of anything on your property or any impact to
So the bushes won't be buried, and then the fence won't be buried because the stake is literally right next to the fence, like inches away on the other side of the fence, and it says rough lot line, and it's like inches from the fence. I'm like,
I understand.
Don't bury my fence. It's a rough line.
Right. And so, I mean, basically the berm fill tapers to nothing at the fence. And so
okay, got it. Great.
That makes sense?
All right. And then also, like in the public access area, there are grasses there as well that help with erosion. Are those going to be buried, or because when they brought in the trucks, they already kind of rolled over a lot of vegetation?
Somebody mentioned that. I had not been down there this summer to see the access on that end. Kevin, have you been down there?
Yeah, they put a giant pile of rocks on top of
If I could jump in, the plan requires that the temporary access path is restored to pre-construction conditions. That's on the plans. So if they took up grass and dune, it has to be replanted.
Okay. All right.
We have a
Thank you.
field engineer out there, Dan
Appreciate
Smith. Just catch up with him and he could give you any information you have.
Yeah, just to reiterate, there is our very skilled engineer from the town is on site. I believe, Kevin, you said every single day, right?
Well, we're strictly distancing, so I appreciate having the Zoom. So,
good. All right, Miss Fay.
Oh,
sorry, are you done, Caroline? Did I cut you off? Okay, we'll go on to Miss Fay. If I can do this right. There you go, Nancy.
Yes, I'm here. If I could ask, though, to have one more person, Teddy Jacobs, be able to ask a question, I would appreciate that. I would like to
raise hand. I'm sorry.
She did, but my question to you is: it's well known that I am not for this project at all, and I would like to see the beach stay exactly the way it is and have this project put on hold. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm looking at it more long term, and I'm looking at it more as this is a unique, special beach, and I'm seeing all these rocks that are going to eventually show up on Egypt Beach. It's my belief from living here for 59 years. But my longer term is you have a 2070 vision. And part of this 2070 vision is your 10-year implementation plan. And nothing's been addressed about all the chain link ponds that are right behind these berms and that are part of your natural foreshore protection. And even in this 2070 plan where and these aren't just fresh water anymore. These are more saltwater, freshwater. Back after the blizzard of 78, when the ponds used to have lights, some of the ponds had lights on them because you could ice skate on them. There was too much of a salt mix in it. So they never freeze anymore. They never completely freeze anymore. So you really can't consider them fresh water anymore. The fresh water that is coming down from Tilden Road, under the road, under Hadley Road, and then over into these ponds, of which there are the 7 chain link ponds. So in this 2070 vision, you also have that a lot of these ponds are degrading and they are turning into mud flats. So I'm trying to propose that we look at this a little bit differently and a little bit more long-term, because the health of those ponds are extremely crucial to your equalization down from Alden Ave all the way up to Surfside. And you have spent a tremendous amount of money on making sure that Musquashit has the gates and everything is proper. But in the meantime, everything in the back is clogged because of all of the cobble that's on top of it. So I'm proposing to try to come up with a better long-term solution that will address this. It's listed as a dune beach. However, it's only listed as a dune beach, and this is according to Audubon also, in my conversations with Audubon, is that there is no definition for a shingle berm beach. And I would like to try to work with the town and work with John and work with environmental to try to reclassify this area, because it's so ecologically sensitive and you have half of it that's dying right now. You've got all of that backside of that cobble that is not functioning anymore with the tons and tons of material that are in it. There has to be something that we can do with the Wetlands Protection Act on, it's causing more harm than good on this backside, and you are stopping a lot of your foreshore protection by not having these ponds equalized properly. So while I'm not a fan of this, I would still like to work with the town and try to figure out how to change what is down there. Now, Audubon can't be on board right now because you have too much already in place, but they are very, very interested in doing something in the future with trying, because this is a highly sensitive area. And right now, who knows what with that, we're calling it Riverstone, but who knows, you put these tons and tons of rocks that should have been rejected at first on top of this very, very, very sensitive ecosystem. From Surfside to Mann Hill, that ecosystem isn't there anymore, at least at this particular point. I don't want that happening to Egypt, but how can we work with the town and change how this area is looked at and change how it functions and get it to be a functioning, workable area again? And that's my question, is I would personally like to have this project halted until we can look at this a little bit more in depth and come up with a better overall long-term plan that goes in with your 10-year plan with the 2070 vision. And that's what I would like to do, because you're losing another foreshore protection method by losing these chain link ponds.
Thank you, Nancy. That's a lot to unpack. And I'm going to ask Jim to jump in a second, but I just want to make a couple of comments. It's a big conversation. We're going to need a whole nother Zoom to go into that conversation. But the town's faced with two things. One is we need to address coastal protection, and that project and that activity has been ongoing, as you point out, for a very long time, and it's very thoughtful. And that if we don't finish this project before the winter, I would be very concerned that we weren't meeting our obligation to protect the property. So that's one thing. As you well know, the conversation about addressing any federal level changes is a long conversation. So we can go into that, but I want to just ask Mr. Bedreau for his insight as somebody that has been around both state and federal officials for a very long time.
Yeah, I talked to Nancy on Friday, and I said I'm more than happy to engage with Nancy on that project to try to make some changes to that. It's not just a problem at Egypt Mann Hill. I get as frustrated as the residents looking at the rocks that are in the pond going, can I just pull those back up? No, can't touch them. But it's an issue at Mann Hill, it's an issue at Peggotty, and it's a huge issue down in Hummerock on Central Ave, where it washes over, and all that washover is killing the marsh, and we're not allowed to touch it. We actually have to cut channels in the marsh in Hummerock to drain the water off the street, but we can't take the stuff out of the marsh. So I'm more than happy to work with Nancy on that. I think you said Pat Canny's, Representative Canny's listening on the call. So I'd probably start with Rep Canny and have some conversations with people, but happy to talk with her. I just think that's a multi-year project. And I don't think, as you say, Karen, don't think we can wait for Egypt Beach at this point.
Nancy, before we go to the next person, you said somebody had raised a hand. I have 3 people that I see. I'm going to unmute you again so I don't miss whoever it is.
Jacobs, was it Jacobs, Nancy?
It was Teddy Jacobs. And
It's not mine, but-
thank you for having this Zoom meeting. It's helpful.
You're welcome. Let me just see if I can, I don't see a hand raised. That's why I'm trying. There's still 100 people on this, so I'm trying to find the right person.
He's still on. There's still a Teddy Jacobs on the call, but he hasn't raised his hand.
It's me. It's me. Hello.
He's unmuted. Unmuted. Yeah.
Do you have me?
I hear somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, she's Ms. Jacobs is talking.
Okay.
I know, Jim. It's like a male name, but.
Oh, there you are. Go ahead. And
Okay.
then we do have a couple more hands and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. Thank you for taking this. So Teddy Jacobs, 58 Egypt Beach Road. I thought I was going to beat Nancy to her second round and I was going to talk more about the 2070, but I think it's important there's been a lot of work with the town. There we go. Hold on. Okay.
Oh, there you are.
There we go. There's been all these focus groups and so forth going on 2070, and part of this project, even though I know that it wasn't the engineer's job to worry about the ponds, which are filling rapidly, not only with our stones, but those phragmites, that I'd like to try to figure out how to address as well, choking off the chain link system, which is supposed to take in the flooding and help the flooding issue during our storm. So at any rate, I won't beat a dead horse because you've covered that pretty well last with Nancy. I'd like to know from Jim when we can see the new material. It's coming in sometime tomorrow, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's coming down from New Hampshire. I can't tell you exactly what time it's going to get here, but it will be here sometime probably in the morning, maybe around lunchtime we'll have it there, Kev.
We're gonna bring it in a smaller truck. We're gonna dump it at the highway barn, and then we'll bring it in a 1-ton, so we have a small sample there. So after driving up to New Hampshire today, I'd like to see it in the morning, but after doing that ride, I highly doubt it. Probably in the afternoon, in all honesty.
Teddy, as soon as it comes in, we'll put a blast out on our Facebook and town website just saying, stones available or something like that, and everybody can get out and take a look at it.
Okay, thank you for that. So no surprise to you guys, there's been a group of about 15 people highly concerned on this. And, as you can see on this, over 100, all as highly concerned, probably not available at 7 a.m. every morning. But we'd really like to invite you guys to come and just meet us on the beach. We can social distance, we're outdoors, we can wear our masks and so forth. And so maybe Jim, Kevin, John, and Karen, and anyone else interested could meet us. It doesn't have to be the 7 a.m. meeting time. It can be at your convenience. But we'd just like to invite you to do that with us. So, we're...
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak for myself. I'm happy to do that. I will note that I know at least 4 out of the 5, I just didn't ask the 5th, of our board have walked it multiple times. I know 2 have walked it with Mr. Ramsey. Several have walked with Mr. Bedreau and Mr. Cafferty. So yeah,
great. We'd like to,
and I walked it from my end. So
yeah, and we've probably all walked it a lot, but to walk it to take a look together and talk about, to really just see what John just went over with us.
How about why don't we see when the stones come in tomorrow? That might be a good time to try to coordinate something. And I'll put it out there. I don't know what anyone else's availability is, but shortly after as long as we're not counting votes until midnight tonight, I'll be up in the morning.
Okay, well, we just want to put that invite out so that, to help the communication factor here.
I'll probably be down there when the rocks get down there. That's kind of my plan for tomorrow, is to show up when the rocks show up.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're down there, just grab me.
Okay. Yeah, and Jim, when you do know they're coming down, text me and I'll just throw something on my selectmen page that I'm headed down there and I'll see who's around. So we'll get it when we can. All right, folks, it's 7:45 and we have 4 more hands raised. I hope I didn't miss anybody else. I apologize, Teddy, I did not see your hand. Mr. Branton, and then Ned, Kathy Gorman, and then Kathy, just Kathy. So Mr. Branton.
Hello, thank you for taking my call and thank you for having this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Boudreau, for recognizing that the inappropriate rocks have been brought to Mann Hill. It's unfortunate that I believe Mann Hill is frankly destroyed. Mann Hill Beach no longer exists. It's covered by rocks that do fall down hills, and these rocks now clutter Man Hill Beach. I would not want to see the same happen to Egypt. The new rocks may be smaller and may be rounder. I will see that tomorrow. I still don't think they're appropriate for what is a shingle beach and what has smooth stones on it now. Nature created this. We should try to preserve it. Even though we've rebuilt it formally, we should rebuild it with similar material. The picture of the cobble that the engineer showed in his PowerPoint covering the rock, that was not put up there by the tide. That was put back there by construction workers. The cobble is not mingling in well with these stones. You can see the picture behind me. It's nowhere near the same thing.
Okay.
And I'd like to hear from the Conservation Commission, who I believe is the authority that could close this thing down, and I have not heard from anybody on the Conservation Commission. And once you make, just one last comment, once you make a mess, it's very difficult and expensive to pick it up. Don't make the mess till you're sure it's not a mess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brenton. As to the Conservation Commission, this was brought before, I mean, Jim, do you want to just run through the process of the approval?
Yeah, I mean, the Conservation Commission had a public hearing, the butters were notified. They had the hearing, and the project is a properly permitted project. If we were not following the permit, then they would be able to get on and shut it down, but they've looked at it, it meets what they've permitted, and therefore their jurisdiction is very limited as long as we're following what's been permitted.
Okay. We have Ned, Kathy, and then Carol has put up a piece of paper that says she'd like to speak as well. So the four of you, and then we'll wrap it up. So Ned, you are next, if I did this right. Yeah, hold on. Sorry for the delay. There you go. Ned?
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
now we can.
I just had a couple of questions for Mr. Ramsey on the, maybe Mr. Boudreau too, about, I've been dealing this for 66 years, and there's got to be a better solution. People arguing about it every 2 or 3 years, and people saying go left, go right, go north, go south, because I get dizzy from doing this all the time. So a couple of things is, Mr. Ramsey, you said after a storm, you're allowed to pull the material from a fan back onto your property. Is that correct? Which what you did in North Scituate?
I think that
an emergency.
I will not say it's necessarily correct. I will say that when a breach is forming, like it happened in 2018, I saw you down there with your piece of equipment clearing the channel, and I also saw the town was doing their best to push the material back up. They weren't going down on the fan necessarily, but they were, the material that was being overwashed, they would go down to the backside of the berm and push it back up into the area that was breaching. So because it's an emergency, you don't want the stuff to flood. Do you have permission to do that? Probably technically not. But I think that everybody would understand that during the storm, to try to patch things up, that you would generally get an emergency type permit after the fact to do that. But that doesn't mean you can go down and excavate out of the pond, material been washed from previous storms, et cetera, to go and bring that back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And all I'm saying is that work has been done for years, and the pond and the marsh is far better off than covered in stones. And there's much more floodplain available, less flooding in the neighborhoods. So really people have to sit down with something about this plan. And secondly is, what about beach scraping and trying to do something like that? I know I had permission to reposition some riprap in front of the house that had drifted away, but from the emergency declaration, but
yeah, maybe I can
is down there on the beach that could get pushed back up.
Right. Okay. So I can probably answer that even more quickly. I will say that beach scraping, if people don't know what that is, it's going down and if material has moved off of the shoreline, is going back and grabbing material that has supposedly done that and pushing it back up onto the berm. The one thing I will say, the reason why that is basically prohibited in Massachusetts and it's probably not a good idea. It's kind of like what we talked about before. The sand comes and goes. If you're pushing that sand up, basically you're allowing bigger waves to attack the berm because you're making the water deeper in front of it. So you really don't want to go do that because you are actually going to make things worse. So that's why they've talked about it in many situations. I know they talk about it up in Plum Island quite a bit, but it really is something that is not a good idea and has caused them some severe problems when people have kind of done it illegally.
Yeah, my brother's in Plum Island. I know they did it up there a few years ago, several times. State's okay.
Ned, would you just quickly give us your address so we have it on the...
Stanton Lane.
All righty, thank you. All right, Kathy, and then Carol, and then we will go see who's our senator. Let me...
Question of Mr. Boudreau.
Oh, sorry.
Or Mr. Cafferty.
Go ahead, Ned.
Kathy Gorman. I live at 69 Seaside Road. I'm a third generation resident of Egypt Beach, and I work with that in my hand. Mr. Boudreau, one thing I wanted to say is we're not trying to cause issues for you folks in the town. We understand that it's always permitted. We have the hearing.
Kathy, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Kathy, I'm sorry. You're coming through completely garbled. We're not hearing anything from you. And Ned, I'm sorry I cut you off. We'll come back to you if you like.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Gorman. I live at 69 Seaside Road, and I'm a third generation resident of this beach, and I know it like the back of my hand. So a couple of things. First, Mr. Ramsey, the beach, in my eyes, does not change over the winter. The rocks that are there now look the same in January, February, March, and December. They don't change. So I didn't understand when you made that comment that the rocks change. And the also comment was that the rocks don't move. The rocks that you put down on Man Hill and on Surfside aren't going to move because they do move. Living on the beach, I see it, I hear it under my house myself. It's like ping pong balls going back and forth on the islands. So I was just curious as to why I'm certain that the mess that's been put between Man Hill and North Scituate is not.
Kathy, I'm going to interrupt you again. I think we're all trying to figure out what you're saying about the rocks moving, but it's really hard to hear you.
And maybe I could try to answer it. I could try to do my best here. I didn't really understand your full question, Kathy, but what this really comes down to, the rocks do move. And when I'm saying that they change, that you do get, after the storms, you do get ridges, as one of the other people had pointed out, you get these cobble ridges that form. There's no doubt that these ridges move back and forth. They generally move landward. And yes, I'm very well aware that the rocks move. I was there during and after the 2018 storms. So I certainly saw the rocks move and the mailboxes that were basically buried down behind the 5 houses there. So there's certainly a lot of movement of material. I'm not quite sure exactly what you're asking, but what I will say is that it does change because you do see the ridges of coarser cobble rise up when you have bigger waves, and then you see that kind of dissipate when when you get finer waves. And the one thing I will say that we do see some of the smaller storms are going to push up some of the finer material over the berm, and I think that's what you were asking about, but I'm not exactly sure. And I think I touched on that already, so I'll keep it short.
All right, we have Kathy and Carol. Kathy, the next Kathy.
Kathy Field.
There we go.
5 Pondview Ave Extension. Lifelong beach walker in Scituate and lover of Egypt Beach, Minot Beach, Peggotty, all of them. I took a walk down the other day to the end of Man Hill Road Extension. There are I believe four public parking spaces at the end of that road. And I traversed up like a goat up those rocks, and I made it. I'm an athlete. And coming down, it was like I was going to break a leg or an ankle. If there's going to be public access over these, this berm, there has to be a better way, whether it be a boardwalk or the rug, because liability to the town is ridiculous. And I'm just concerned and disappointed in the way that the town has handled this.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Kevin, did you want to add anything to that, or Jim?
I don't know if there's actually four public parking spaces down there. I think it's just an area that's flattened out that people park at. I know we get calls from some different people where people do park there and pin people in, but that is one of the areas where the contractor was going to come back and try to address with some smaller stone to make it similar to the other side of Surfside, so it'd be easy to get over. But remember, that whole area is constantly moving. But I don't think it's opened up as public access right there.
Carol, you are going to get to do cleanup here. There you go. Carol?
Thank you. I live on Mann Hill, and I'm relatively new to town, but one thing that I think a lot of the people in the area of Mann Hill enjoy is being able to get down, as Kathy said, to the beach in one way or another. So I'm thankful, Kevin, that you're going to hopefully address some of the access at that point. The other thing that I'm a little concerned about is if you actually look at the berm, I walk down there almost every day, you can see that the waves have already started to really eat away significant chunks of the berm over at Mann Hill, and it's creating a very, very large drop off, so that it's kind of dangerous. And now all of the larger rocks are actually falling down onto the beach. And I know you say that, oh, those are going to be pushed up, but if you go look at Mann Hill, you'll see that there's a huge chunk of the berm that's come out from waves that happened over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of the larger rocks that were in the berm that you guys just put up are now resting on the beach. Is there something that the town can do to rectify the fact that the berm is kind of already a mess there? I think that's one of the concerns with a lot of people about Egypt Beach, because they're looking at what's going on right down at Mann Hill, and they're like, we don't want that happening, where all of these large rocks are just rolling down onto the beach just after not even really a storm, really just high tide and, you know, a bit of rain and wind action.
If somebody wants to chime in, but that's something we will definitely have Dan and Kevin go take a look at. I'm not aware of that happening.
You just walk straight down.
Okay.
If you walk down from
there
Surfside, Karen, you walk all the way down, and it's right before, if you look at the area, all the area right before where the homes are, you'll see that there's a huge chunk of the berm that's already come out, and all of the rocks have fallen on the beach.
Carol, is this the Mann Hill end or the Surfside end?
It's the Mann Hill end. It's
Okay.
what we were all concerned about, that the large rocks that you put up there are going to not fall back into the ponds, or, you know, the way you say it's not going to move. What's happening is they're falling down onto the beach.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely take a look at that, because it obviously shouldn't be occurring. So that is all of the questions. Are we done, Carol? I didn't want to cut you off either. Okay. Oh, you just evaporated. So hold on. You got, sorry, Carol, you got muted there.
That's okay. I just wish you guys would go ahead and take a look and see what's happening down at Mann Hill, where you've put such a huge, significant amount of this material so you can really get an understanding of what might happen at Egypt Beach before you move forward with anything at Egypt. Because you know, Man Hill, really, a lot of people use that area to walk on, and we occasionally go down and we'll sit there. You see people there quite often, you know, but Egypt Beach is also the public beach. And, you know, I would hate to see such massive rocks all over Egypt Beach, because I know there's a lot of people that enjoy that beach.
Carol, if I can just make 2 quick points. One, we'll get down and look at what's going on down at the end of Man Hill. We'll send the engineer down, Dan, and see what's going on. But what happened at the end of Man Hill is magnitudes larger than what we are planning on Egypt Beach. It is nowhere near that magnitude project. As John said, there's 5 to 6 feet at the end of Man Hill. Egypt Beach is 18 inches to 2 feet of cobble. So it's not what you're seeing at Man Hill is not what's going to be down at Egypt Beach. And as John said earlier, we've already sourced smaller stones and we will bury them under the existing stones. So it won't look anything like what you're seeing at Man Hill.
Okay, and also keep in mind that the way the berm was done at Man Hill is also contributing, I think, to a significant amount of beach erosion in that area.
Okay, unless John has a comment.
Yeah, I don't really have a comment other than to say that, you know, typically adding materials is not going to lead to beach erosion unless you are actually putting in something like if I were putting boulders in the surf zone, I might see that contributing to erosion. But by putting something on top of the berm, that should not have any effect on beach erosion in that area.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We've been at this 2 hours. I so appreciate everyone taking the time to come and have this conversation with all of us. I hope we answered most of your questions. I do want to just say that we, just to recap, we have reduced the size of the rock significantly that has been specified for the Egypt Beach portion, and that will be buried in the berm. Tomorrow, as soon as the rocks are available for public viewing, doesn't sound right, but yes, for public inspection, the town will post an announcement. I will do the same on my Facebook page, and we'll try to make sure that whoever is available can coordinate meeting. Residents who want to review them, you know, with officials there, we'll do that as best we can tomorrow. Tomorrow, Jim is going to be posting a summary of frequently asked questions. A lot of these were answered tonight, but for those who couldn't attend or those who want to see it in written form, that'll be posted tomorrow. And the recording of this Zoom meeting will also be put out there. So if someone says, I forgot to get on, they'll have an opportunity to get this information. So I thank you all for your time and attention. I hope this was useful to you all, and thank you to our staff and officials for helping out with this. So hope everyone has a good night. Let's go vote. Oh wait, too late to vote. Good night, everybody.